What's up, everybody? This is Encanti from Zebbler Encanti Experience, and today we are going to deconstruct the track Moonrise off of Syncorswim. Now, this was a really fun track, and we're doing a lot of really interesting things here. I'm going to actually show you how to make one of the instruments in this track. But first, let's just go ahead and listen to it and kind of pick apart the different parts as they come up, and I'll show you kind of not only the channels and what's happening here, but also kind of my thinking and my process behind it. The intro here, it actually starts with a sound of me actually sitting at a piano and opening it and playing a note. And then we go into some granular sounds. So this lovely piano is called Noir from Contact, and I wrote this part in two different tracks. We start with this MIDI track called Chords A. These are the kind of waltzy chords that go back and forth, and then the top line melody is on this track. The reason that I separate the two MIDI tracks mainly is so I can put different velocity effects on these tracks. You see the melody has a higher curve and different random settings. I find that it's good in Ableton to utilize random settings when you're trying to imitate a realistic instrument, just to add that factor of human error. After writing this in these two tracks, those two parts merged together and were recorded into this track that says piano full. And you can see that I've edited these notes quite a bit. If we zoom in, many of them are not exactly on the beat, and that is, again, just to add a little bit of human error factor. The rule of thumb, though, if you'd like to get a piano that sounds like a good imitation like this one, I'm not going to say it completely sounds realistic, but it's a good imitation. My rule of thumb here is to stagger the notes from left to right, because when you play piano, when you're actually sitting at piano, more often than not, you play the notes kind of low from high, like a brah. It's just kind of a natural tendency. So I find that that sounds a lot more realistic than making it completely random. You just gotta kind of imagine how your fingers might fly over these keys. While the piano is playing, there is a little bit of granular stuff going on. I just grabbed this interesting loop, and that kind of fades away. Meanwhile, the OB6 is over here just very gently doing the chords. To get this pad sound, I use a really cool feature that Sequential Circuits puts in their synthesizers, where you can press hold and it just ignores the amplitude envelope and it just holds the notes. So you can get these really nice ambient tones that are just kind of connected and swirling together in interesting ways. I think while it's playing, I'm also increasing the amount of saturation. You can hear that kind of crisp edge creeping up. I think this was actually, yeah, this was recorded here at Eagle Rock. This is the sound of rain on the windowsill. This is a beautiful recording I got one rainy day. The drops were just coming down, and I mean, you can put that in any track and it sounds great. So here at the end of this piano phrase, I actually cut into a different, oh, a lot of feedback right there. Sorry. Here at the end of this phrase, I cut into a different piano take. You see this says piano resamp 7. This is piano resamp 1. I actually have this general piece of advice. If you're using like contact instruments. Obviously, this is all preset oriented stuff. And sometimes you might pull up a trumpet or a xylophone, whatever live instrument you have, record the same thing with multiple versions of that instrument. And you'll end up with a whole bunch of different, kind of remixed variations on the music that you're putting into it. We have a lot of just single takes here. What's going on here? Yeah, this is my OB6 kind of doing the hi-hats. Let's get to something more interesting. Here we go. I like this part. So this kind of sits in the mix almost like a percussive thing, but all these glitch sounds came out of my OB6. And those sounds blend nicely with, there we go, glitch. All of these glitch sounds right here were made with a generative sampler patch. And as you can see, they're mostly just long takes. The coolest part about this is that this is truly random. And I just kind of played, I recorded lots and lots of these random takes and tried to cut out my favorite parts and rearrange parts, but you can see that it's not micro-edited. These are just long takes. Little compression. Simple stuff. Also, you'll notice that I put trash on everything. It's kind of my salt and pepper. I should get up to the drums. Other than the glitch, what else do we got going on? Yeah, there's that big 808 bass that is created with operator. And that's just operator going into glue and trash. And this is the same low end I use for basically all the Z tracks. A little bit of claps from shout out to Halfred. And a little more sounds from Schwex coming in. Another really good producer, makes great sample libraries. This is Impulse. Haha, bet you didn't use Impulse, but sometimes I do. And the reason being, you can add this randomness to Impulse, and that's something that is just so immediate and available and sounds really cool. And it also has this really trashy, old school time stretch built into it. I think Impulse is like a really hidden gem sometimes. Listen to that. You can just make like really aw-techer sounding Telephone Tel Aviv little blippy things. And yeah, normal kick drum. At this point in the track, it starts to get more synthy and it starts to go in kind of a tech house direction. And that's when the OB6 comes in and a little bit more full force with the plucks. And at first, this is just one long recording. You can see this is just my 9th attempt at getting this part. And the delay that you hear in that is not an effect I'm using. That is built into, that is a delay that's coming right out of the OB6. Risky, I know, but I thought it sounded great. You just got to go with what your ears say. So something here interesting happens this whole time as I'm doing this part of the chord progression. I'm recording all of these parts in one synth take. This is a bass part and this kind of a melodic part. But then those two parts split into two, because at that point, when it really takes off, I want to mix them differently. So then we got the top part coming in right here. And separately, we have the chord part right here. And I've cut off some of the lows and the chords right there, so I can come in with the sub again, and all that mixes together like. Here's where some interesting glitch variation starts to come in as well. Let me point these out. It says clouds in big letters. I took the generative glitch, which I'm going to show you how I made in a second, and I ran them all through my Mutable Instruments Clouds Eurorack module, which I used for a lot of the great granular sounds on this album. One of the reasons I really like this module is it handles the stereo image really well, and you can get so many infinitely small variations by tweaking these parameters with control signals. Yeah. So I think that's actually, yeah, it's just running the full mix through clouds and finding these little neat moments. Oh, here's all the takes. Let's listen. Let's check out the raw take. This is what it sounded like coming right out of clouds. Not much of anything. Yeah, here we go. Here's some good stuff. That's a good one too. So as you can hear, the idea here is that right out of the granulator, it doesn't sound like much, but it doesn't need to make sense temporally. It doesn't need to be on the beat. It just kind of stretches apart all of the sounds and the timbres, and you get to use those parts as fills. So we're coming in here with these little neat fills, and it's just adding to these moments. Actually, looking around the project file, I'm surprised about how much isn't happening. I mean, the chords on this section, for instance, is just one continuous take. And when that filter opens, that is me opening that filter by hand. Same with all these other parts right here. You can see this is just one long take. Oh, and then this sound is great. I just hit this note perfectly wrong. Oh, wait, yeah, there's that one, and then, oh, this one kind of links to this. That's just catching the oscillator detune in just the right spot. I remember hearing that and saying, oh, that is such a good sweet spot. I really like that moment. And then we launch into the central theme again, this time with all the synths playing along together. And a little bit more decoration with the granulizer. Let's hear it. Love these parts, especially this. Yeah, sounds like that. Is just in my headphones, the stereo image of that is so beautiful. And what I like to do with those sounds is kind of pair them with the rhythmic gestures. So it's filling up those great little spots in between and everything. You can see that most of this track is really just clouds with the generative drums and synthesizer and a couple of drum sounds, and that's the entire track. Oh, and the piano, which I love the sound of on this track. All right, so let me get deeper into how I did the generative drums on this. I keep referring to these generative drums, and I have them actually right here in a muted track. You can see that all of the drums we use here, it says glitch resample, because these drums actually never sound the same twice. So you actually have to record them and find the good moments. And it's actually really easy because a lot of it's really good. You can see that there's not a lot of micro editing. There's just kind of macro editing right there to get the phrases right. But you know, it's completely random, essentially. Every time you play it, you never know what you're going to hear. So let's listen to it a little bit. So what is happening here? Let's describe this patch. You can see there's a lot of insanity down here. This is a really fun patch. All right, let's look at what's going on. First of all, the velocity is coming in at fixed 127. And then basically we're just playing one note per 2 bars, like just droning a note. And that note is going into an arpeggiator, which has a LFO that is randomly changing the rate here on time. If we go to the zones, selection right here, there we go. This is just randomly selecting a different sample. And the key I honestly forgot what the key does, but key is something that you can, yeah, here we go. Like key is attached to the filter. Key is just something that you can attach to things. So I think that the reason I added this arpeggiator to do the steps so the key can jump around. Okay, the most important part is velocity right here. You can see that we have a range of randomness. That randomness is mainly driving sample offset right here. And this is why we're skipping around, why it sounds so cool. And it's also morphing the filter. So here we have velocity, which is random in a range, skipping where in the sample plays from. That's called sample offset. And it's also morphing the filter. So each new random velocity is going to put those two settings in a different place. So think of it this way. This zone selector is selecting a different sample out of 5 different really long samples. And every time it lands on a different sample, that's playing back from a different position because velocity is changing the sample offset. So because we are changing what sample we're looking at and where in the sample we're reading all the time, the chances of playing the same part again, like more than once, is actually very small. So this is a way to maximize variation when you have a large corpus of sound loaded into your sampler. Okay, here we have my generative echo. Now this is based on honestly, it's just me trying to attempt to do what Richard Devine does. Shout out to Richard Devine's Instagram. All the time I hear in the generative music that he does on Eurorack, I always hear like delay lines that have, you know, different modulation sources. Like on a Eurorack, you can just plug anything into anything sometimes. And I always hear Richard Devine's delay lines mangling the audio. So my idea was to connect a whole bunch of Max for Live LFOs to a couple parameters in echo. And that should do what Richard does with Euroracks, albeit poor imitation. One trick here is notice my input signal right there is just hopping up and down between low and high. The reason for that is that input signal is actually controlled by a rectangle wave instead of one of these sample and hold waves. But the phase is actually controlled by another LFO. So this is an LFO controlled by a different LFO in order to get random fluctuations of all the way up and all the way down. Kind of cool, huh? So we don't know when the echo will flip on. Sometimes it's getting a full signal of 12 dB and sometimes it's getting negative 40. Yeah. All right, and that's pretty much the end of our chain. We go into a multiband dynamics and then another glue compressor. The idea of all this is to just kind of create maximum variation. I just wanted to be able to hear a constant flow of constantly changing timbres and all different portions of these recordings. It's sometimes fun, like throw something like random like vocals amongst all these drums, and you see that it's just there's 5 of these different possible samples. So there's a 1 in 5 chance that this can land on vocals instead of some glitchy granular drum. But no matter what it does, it's going to be shooting along to the beat, and it'll probably be different every single time. All right, that is Moonrise. Hopefully you've enjoyed this deconstruction, and this has demystified the track a little bit. It was a lot of fun putting together this track. I really put a lot of love into this one, as well as the other tracks on Syncorswim. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, or if you have any feedback, or want to share your own version of this kind of generative sample mangling, please leave a comment or send me a message. I'm always open in my DMs. All right, everybody. Catch you later. This is Encanti out.